The morning mist was a shroud over the jagged peaks of the crystalline range, a place where birds fell silent and travelers dared not tread. Deep within its highest, most secluded valley, surrounded by rare herbs glowing with a soft, ethereal light, Riven curled his massive body around the ruins of an ancient shrine. His scales, once a brilliant azure and diamond white, had faded to a muted sapphire, a reflection of his own diminished spirit. The great crystal at the center of his chest, his very heart, was visibly fractured. It beat with only faint, sporadic pulses of light, a pale shadow of the beacon it once was. "Another dawn," he rumbled, his voice a low tremor that echoed through the empty valley. "Another meaningless cycle." For 300 years, Riven had kept this lonely vigil, the last of the crystal dragons. The others were gone, lost in the Great Divide War, betrayed by the human allies they had sworn to protect, and the rival dragon clans they had fought alongside. The memories were a constant, haunting ache. The shattering of his heart was not just a metaphor. He remembered the exact moment of its cracking, coinciding with the discovery of the ambush laid by those he trusted most. Far below the mountain, nestled in a valley that had once flourished under the protection of his kind, lay the village of Elder Hollow. A strange sickness had crept into the village, a wasting illness that stole the color from skin and the strength from limbs. The village healer, a young woman named Naira, stood at the edge of her garden, her face etched with frustration. She looked down at the withered plants in her hands, herbs that refused to yield their healing properties. "The dragonthorn flowers," she said, her voice tight. Turning to her apprentice, Leon, he shifted nervously, his gaze darting towards the looming mountains. "They're the only cure, and they only grow in the high valley." "The Dragon's Valley," Leon whispered, his eyes wide with a fear that was deeply ingrained in their people. "Naira, you can't be serious. No one who's gone looking for those herbs has ever come back." Naira pulled back her auburn hair, tying it firmly. The act seemed to solidify her resolve, hardening her gentle features into a mask of determination. "My grandmother used to tell me stories," she said, more to herself than to Leon. Stories of a time when dragons and humans were allies, when they healed one another. There has to be some reason left in that creature. "Your grandmother told children's tales," Leon protested, his voice rising in panic. "This is madness. That beast will kill you." But Naira's decision was already made. The sight of the sick children, their breaths growing shallower each day, had forged her fear into unshakable purpose. That night, under the sliver of a crescent moon, she prepared a small satchel. It wasn't filled with weapons, but with offerings. There were rare spices from a faraway market, ancient texts salvaged from the village archives, texts that spoke of the nature and history of crystal dragons, and a small, handcrafted flute carved from white oak. Her grandmother had taught her the melodies, tunes said to soothe magical beings. Knowledge passed down through generations of her family's healers. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Naira began the treacherous climb. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step, a frantic drumbeat echoing the altitude's strain. The air grew thin and cold, and the landscape began to change. Strange, luminous plants started appearing between the rocks, their soft glow a clear sign she was entering a land steeped in ancient magic. By midday, exhausted but resolute, she reached the boundary. It wasn't a wall or a gate, but a shimmering veil of mist that hung in the air, dividing the world of humans from the dragon's domain. She took a deep breath, hesitated for only a moment, and then stepped through. The valley that opened before her stole her breath away. It was a place of impossible beauty, alive with a raw, magical energy that pulsed from every stone, every leaf, every blade of grass. Fields of dragonthorn flowers spread out before her, their crystalline petals catching the sunlight and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. It was a paradise born from a single creature's sorrow. Human. The voice was like thunder, a physical force that shook the very ground beneath her feet. "You trespass in my domain." From behind a towering crystal formation, Riven emerged. His massive form blotted out the sun, casting her in a sudden cold shadow. His eyes, ancient and filled with a pain so deep it seemed to have carved canyons into his soul, fixed upon her. The sheer intensity of his gaze was enough to make her want to turn and flee, to scramble back down the mountain to the safety of her mundane world. But she didn't. Instead, Naira did something no human had dared to do in centuries. She carefully placed her satchel on the ground, knelt and bowed her head. It wasn't a bow of fearful submission, but one of profound respect. "I am Naira of Elderhollow," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I have come seeking dragonthorn flowers to heal my people." "Humans," Riven snarled, the sound a low, dangerous vibration. The fractured crystal in his chest dimmed further, as if the very word human was a poison. "Always taking, always destroying. I bring offerings," Naira said, slowly reaching for her satchel and opening it. "And questions, if you would permit them. My grandmother spoke of a time when our kinds healed each other." A deep, threatening rumble emanated from the dragon's massive chest. "Your grandmother lied," he growled. "There is no healing for what humanity has done." But as he spoke, Naira saw it. A subtle shift in his posture, a momentary, almost imperceptible flicker of light within his fractured heart. It was a crack in his armor of rage, a glimpse of something that, even after centuries of bitter solitude, still yearned to be understood. "Perhaps," she said softly, her voice carrying on the magically charged air, "we could begin again." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of 300 years of pain. But in that silence, for the first time in a long, long time, a tiny seed of hope began to take root in the Dragon's Valley. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales from realms of magic and myth. We'll see you in the next video. The days that followed established a cautious routine. Each morning, Naira would climb the mountain path, leaving small offerings of bread and fruit at the misty boundary before venturing into Riven's domain. The dragon watched her from a distance, a silent, glittering sentinel among the peaks, as she carefully harvested just enough dragonthorn flowers for her village's needs. She never took more than was necessary, a fact that did not go unnoticed. On the 5th day, as the sun climbed high, casting long shadows across the flowering meadow, Riven finally broke the silence. His massive form descended, landing with a soft thud that barely disturbed the blossoms. "Why do you return?" he asked, his voice a low rumble like shifting stone. "You have what you came for." Naira looked up from her work, her hands stained with the flower's luminescent nectar. She wasn't startled. She had been expecting this. "The villagers are improving, but the sickness is deeply rooted. It will return without a constant supply," she explained calmly. Then she hesitated, a spark of courage in her eyes. "And I find myself curious about you." A low grumble emanated from the dragon's chest. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing for mortals, little healer." Despite his warning, he settled his great body onto a nearby rock outcropping, closer than he had ever come before. He folded his crystalline wings, their facets catching the light and scattering tiny rainbows across the grass. Seeing this as a small victory, Naira unpacked her simple lunch of bread and cheese. With a boldness that surprised even herself, she broke off a portion and placed it on a flat stone near the dragon. He eyed the offering but didn't move. "My grandmother told me stories," Naira said, her voice soft but clear. "She said that crystal dragons once shared their knowledge with human healers, that there was a time of harmony." At the mention of her grandmother, Riven's fractured heart pulsed with an unexpected faint glow. "Your grandmother, what was her name?" The question was sharp, tinged with an emotion Naira couldn't quite place. "Ilara," Naira replied. "They called her Ilara of the Silver Hands because of her skill in crafting remedies." The dragon grew very, very still. The air around them seemed to thicken. "I knew an Ilara once," Riven said, his voice barely a whisper. "A long time ago. She was different from other humans. She saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be." A comfortable quiet settled between them as Naira ate her meal. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she drew a small white oak flute from her satchel. She brought it to her lips and began to play. The melody that drifted through the valley was not a common human tune. It was an ancient dragon lullaby, a song of peace and slumber that few of her kind even remembered. Riven's eyes, which had been half closed, snapped wide open in recognition. The facets of his crystal scales shimmered, and for the first time since she had met him, the centuries of pain in his gaze momentarily lifted, replaced by a profound, heart-wrenching nostalgia. The fractured crystal in his chest pulsed with a soft, steady light. As Nira gathered her things to leave, the last notes of the lullaby fading into the twilight, Riven spoke. His voice was no longer a challenge, but a quiet statement. "Tomorrow," he said, "you may return." The next day and the day after, her visits changed. They were no longer just about harvesting flowers. After her work was done, Riven would guide her deeper into the mountain, to caverns that humans hadn't seen for generations. "This way," he murmured, his massive form navigating the crystalline tunnels with an innate grace. He led her to a vast cavern where the walls were covered in breathtaking murals, etched into the living crystal of the mountain itself. They depicted a history long forgotten by the world outside. The first panels showed dragons and humans working side by side, building cities and weaving magic together. The murals glowed with a soft internal light, showing a harmonious past. But as they walked deeper, the images turned dark. They depicted the devastating betrayal of the Great Divide War. Riven paused before a scene of chaos and fire. The human king and the patriarch of the fire dragons conspired together, he explained, his voice heavy with ancient sorrow. They grew greedy and fearful. They feared our healing magic would make their power, their wars, their reigns of fear obsolete. Nira reached out, her fingertips hovering just above the crystal surface that depicted the massacre of the crystal dragons. The sorrow in the art was so palpable, it felt like a physical chill. "Not all of us wanted this fate," she whispered, her own heart aching for this forgotten tragedy. That night, a fierce, unexpected storm broke over the mountain. Wind howled through the peaks and rain fell in blinding sheets, making the path down impossible. Riven, seeing her predicament, guided her to a sheltered alcove. He then did something extraordinary. He draped one of his massive wings over the entrance, creating a sturdy, glittering shelter. The warmth radiating from his body kept the damp chill of the cave at bay. As thunder crashed outside, they talked. They shared stories of their lives, his spanning centuries of solitude and memory, hers merely a few decades, yet both marked by a profound loneliness. He spoke of the stars as they were in a younger world. She spoke of the simple joys of a village festival. In that small, warm space, they were not a dragon and a human, but two souls finding a kindred spirit in the dark. As Nira finally drifted to sleep, lulled by the storm and the dragon's steady warmth, Riven's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "You smell like wildflowers," he murmured, a simple observation filled with a strange tenderness. In that hazy state between waking and sleep, Nira acted on pure instinct. She reached out a gentle hand and laid it softly on the fractured crystal in his chest. Riven's entire body tensed, a reflex born of centuries of pain and guarding his weakness. But he didn't pull away. He allowed her touch. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep, even broken. Under her touch, for just a fleeting moment, his heart didn't just glow. It blazed, shining brighter than it had in 1,000 years, pushing back the shadows of the cave and the sorrow in his soul.